Module 4, Lesson 29, Multi-Step Problems, All Operations. Our learning targets are: I can use knowledge of simplifying expressions, order of operations, and properties of equality to calculate the solution of multi-step equations. I can use tables to determine answers, and I can check to determine if answers are correct. Our first example. The school librarian, Mr. Marker, knows the library has 1,400 books, but wants to reorganize how the books are displayed on the shelves. Mr. Marker needs to know how many fiction, nonfiction, and resource books are in the library. He knows that the library has 4 times as many fiction books as resource books, and half as many nonfiction books as fiction books. If these are the only types of books in the library, how many of each type of book are in the library? So our first step to help us solve this problem, because it is a story problem, is we are going to go in and we are going to underline or circle anything that we think is important. So the first thing that I think is important is the fact that the library has 1,400 books. All right, so now we know that the library has 4 times as many fiction books as resource books and has half as many nonfiction books as fiction books. And then we want to know how many of each type of book are in the library. So now that we've underlined important information, we can start solving this question. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to draw a tape diagram to represent the total number of books in the library. So I'm going to draw our tape diagram, and inside it's going to have 1,400 because the library has 1,400 books. Next, I'm going to draw a tape diagram to represent the resource books, and that's just going to be one little box, and this is resource. Next, for fiction, we know that fiction books are 4 times as many as the resource books, so I'm going to draw a rectangle and cut it into 4s. And we are going to draw a tape diagram for nonfiction books, and we know that nonfiction is half of fiction, so it's just going to have 2. What variable should we use throughout our problem when we're writing our equation? So because resource is the one with the single box, it's going to represent 1, we can use the letter R. So we're going to use the variable R in our equations. So now that we chose a variable, we can start writing our equations and solving the problem. But first I'm going to draw a tape diagram, and I'm going to put in, I'm going to cut the rectangle. First box is going to have R to represent the resource books. The second rectangle will be 4R, because there are 4 times as many fiction books, and then the second, or the last box, will be 2R, because half of 4 is 2, so 2R, and then this whole thing represents 1,400. So now we can write our equation. So we'll have R plus 4R plus 2R is equal to 1,400. And because all 3 of these numbers have R in them, we can add them together. So we can do R plus 4R, which gives us 5R. So we have 5R plus 2R is equal to 1,400. And then we can add them together again. So 5R plus 2R is 7R, which is equal to 1,400. Now remember, in yesterday's lesson, we said that when we're solving algebraic equations, we need to get the variable by itself. So in order to do that, we have 7R, so that means we're multiplying. So we have to do the opposite, which is division. So we're going to divide both sides by 7, because whatever you do to one side, you have to do the other side. This is going to get rid of the 7s and leave R by itself, and then 1,400 divided by 7 equals 200. So we solved part of the question because we know that there are going to be 200 resource books, but we want to know how many of each type of book are in the library. So we can do this by plugging in 200 into the other equations. So for fiction, we had 4R, or 4 times 200, which is going to give us 800. And then for nonfiction, it was 2R, or 2 times 200, which is equal to 400. And lastly, we're going to put it into a table. So in our table, I'm going to have fiction, nonfiction, that I'm just shortening to non, resource, which I'm just going to abbreviate because I'm running out of room, and then total. So the first thing in our table we're going to do is we're going to put in the variables that were down here, but we're only going to put in the numbers. So instead of writing 4R for fiction, we're just going to write 4. Instead of writing 2 R's for nonfiction, we're just going to write 2. And a single R is just 1. So in resource, it will be 1. Add them all up for the total. So 4 plus 2 plus 1, and we get 7. And at the bottom of our table, we know that our total has to be 1400. We know that 1R is equal to 200 because we figured that out. Nonfiction, when we did it down here in the blue, we got 400. And then for fiction, we got 800. So when it asks you to use a table to solve the question, that's what it means. This is what it wants you to do. So there are 800 fiction books, there are 400 fiction or nonfiction books, and there are 200 resource books. So does the library have 4 times as many fiction books as resource books? Yes, because 4 times 200 is equal to 800. Does the library have half as many nonfiction books as fiction books? Yes, because 400 is half of 800. And does the library have 1,400 books? Yes, because 200 plus 400 plus 800 equals 1,400. So if you're not sure if your answers are correct, you can just go back in, add up on the numbers you got, and see if it equals the total. If it does not equal the total it gave you, then your answers are not correct. So always make sure you check your answers, and especially check your answers if you're not sure. Alright, our next example. Indiana Ridge Middle School wanted to add a new school sport, so they surveyed the students to determine which sport is most popular. Students were able to choose among soccer, football, lacrosse, or swimming. The same number of students chose lacrosse and swimming. The number of students who chose soccer was double the number of students who chose lacrosse. And the number of students who chose football was triple the number of students who chose swimming. So if 434 students completed the survey, how many students chose each sport? Alright, so I'm going to start by making a table. So we have soccer and football and lacrosse, and I'm just going to abbreviate these, and swimming, and then total. Okay, so we know that the total number of students is 434, so I'm going to put it down here. And now we need to fill in this first row in our chart. So we know that the same number of students chose lacrosse and swimming. So I'm just going to use the variable s, and I'm going to say that this is 1 and this is 1, and our variable will be s. And then we know that soccer was double the number of students who chose lacrosse, so the double of 1 is 2. And then the number of students who chose football was triple the number of students who chose lacrosse. So triple is 3, so 1 times 3 is 3. So we can add this all up. So 2 plus 3 plus 1 plus 1 is going to give us 7. So we know we're going to have 7s. So now that we have that, we can make an equation and we can solve it. So we'll have 7s is equal to 434. We want to get s by itself, so we have to divide both sides by 7. So s is going to be equal to 62. And because s represents 1, we can fill in 62 for lacrosse and swimming. So now we just have to find out how many people chose soccer and how many chose football. So in order to do that, we'll have, for football, we will have 3 times 62, which is 186. And then for soccer, we will have 2 times 62, which is 124. Our next example. At Prairie Elementary School, students are asked to pick their lunch ahead of time so the kitchen staff will know what to prepare. On Monday, 6 times as many students chose hamburgers as chose salads. The number of students who chose lasagna was 1/3 the number of students who chose hamburgers. And if 225 students ordered lunch, how many students chose each option? So I'm going to start by making our table. So we will have hamburgers, salad, and lasagna. So we know that there are 225 students, so we can fill that one in the second row. And now we can go in and we can fill in our first row. So we know that 6 times as many students chose hamburgers as salad. So I'm going to say that salad is going to be 1, so we'll use the variable of s again. And 6 times 1 is going to give us 6, so hamburgers will be 6. And then the number of students who chose lasagna was 1/3 the number of students who chose hamburgers. So 1/3 of 6 is 2. So 2 will be lasagna. And now we just have to add them up. So 6 plus 1 plus 2 for a total of 9. And now we can write our equation. So we will have 9s is equal to 225. Now we solve. Divide both sides by 9. So s is going to be equal to 25. So we know that 25 students chose salads. Now we have to find out how many chose hamburgers and how many chose lasagna. So for hamburgers, we're going to have 6 times s, which is 25. So 150. And then for lasagna, we will have 2 times s, which is 25, which is equal to 50. So 150 chose hamburger, 25 chose salad, and 50 chose lasagna. Next example. The art teacher, Mr. Gonzalez, is preparing for a project in order for students to have the correct supplies. Mr. Gonzalez needs 10 times more markers than pieces of construction paper. He needs the same number of bottles of glue as pieces of construction paper. The number of scissors required for the project is half the number of pieces of construction paper. And if Mr. Gonzalez collected 40 items, how many of each supply did he collect? So we're going to start by doing our table. So we'll have markers, and yes, I'm still abbreviating words just to save some room. So paper, glue, scissors, total. So So we know that he ordered 400 items, so that can go right there. And now we can fill in our first row. So the number of scissors required for the project is half the number of pieces of construction paper. And we know that he needs the same number of bottles of glue as pieces of construction paper, and that he has 10 times more markers than pieces of construction paper. So for markers, we're going to have 20. For paper, we're going to have 2. For glue, we're going to have 2. And for scissors, we're going to have 1. We will use the variable of s since scissors has the 1 for a total of 25. Now we can write our equation. So 25s is equal to 400. Divide both sides by 25. So s is equal to 16. So he ordered 16 scissors. Solve for glue. We will have 2 times 16, which is 32. And because he has the same amount of glue as paper, we know that paper has to be 32 as well. And then for markers, it will be 20 times 16, which is 320. So he has 320 markers, 32 pieces of construction paper, 32 glue bottles, 16 scissors. In our last example, the math teacher, Ms. Zentz, is buying appropriate math tools to use throughout the year. She is planning on buying twice as many rulers as protractors. The number of calculators Ms. Zentz is planning on buying is 1/4 the number of protractors. If Ms. Zentz buys 65 items, how many protractors does Ms. Zentz buy? So here we only want to know how many protractors, but we're still going to have to figure out how many of each she bought in order to do that. So we're going to start with our table. We have rulers. We have protractors. We have calculators. And then total. We know that she bought 65 items in total, so 65 will go there. So we know that she is planning on buying 1/4 of the number of protractors for calculators, so we're going to say that calculators is 1, so we'll use the variable of c. And she has twice as many rulers as protractors, so 8 and 4. So add them up. 8 plus 4 plus 1 is 13. We can write our equation now. So 13c is equal to 65. Divide both sides by 13. So c is equal to 5. So she bought 5 calculators. Now, let's find out how many rulers she bought. So rulers is going to be 5 times 8, which is 40. And then protractors, which is what we wanted to answer our question, is 4 times 5, which is 20. So Ms. Zentz bought 20 protractors. And that's it. Now you can go complete the problem set.